Okay, I'm there. Ready? Ready?
Yeah.
All right. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Regional Planning Commission Wednesday, May 8th edition and begin with roll call. And I will ask Commissioner Barnes to lead us this evening.
We're gonna do roll call first.
Please, sorry, roll call first. Roll call first, okay. Great.
I was so ready to go. I was like, we're all here. Let's just get rolling.
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, let's just get done. We'll start with number one. Roll call, please.
Frank Peterson.
Here.
James Fewens.
Here.
Dan Vanderbilt. Here. James Barnes.
Here.
Sarah Chavilicek.
Here.
Larry Chesney.
Here.
Ed Hawkins.
Here.
Kevin Weisky.
Here.
Peter Gower.
Here. Thank you. All right, Commissioner
Okay.
Barnes, I gave you the heads up so you could remember the pledge. You know?
Okay, thank you.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks so much. We'll move on to item 3, approval of the agenda. Looking for a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Move on to item 4, public comment.
I have one for this item. Tammy holds still.
Okay, great. Tammy.
Good evening, Tammy Hopedale, Living Valley County Recovery Community for the record.
Of course, the water's still there, and I'm still here. The reason I'm back in front of you guys again is due to the fact that, as I've been saying all along, you guys are the mothership when it comes to planning. And we need planning when it comes to the North Valleys and the closed basins. It's time to start having concern and addressing the issues. There's more water today than there was in 2017. And if one of those Tesco barriers was to fail, there would be a lot more people flooded than what there was in 2017. It's not looking good. They're holding out. We keep praying that they stay holding out, but it comes down to it's time for thinking caps to go on and people to start really talking and communicating and doing what needs to be done to move forward when it comes to development in the North Valleys and the closed basins. It's just not Swan Lake. Silver Lake has issues, White's Lake has issues, and putting development in those with the way they are right now is gonna make things worse. So it's time to figure out what causes these lakes to stay so full, so long, and how to fix it. Now, I can tell you all the reasons why Swan Lake is the way it is, but I think you guys already know the reasons why. Bad development, my new saying is, new development doesn't correct bad development. Just doesn't do it. They're not gonna put out the money for it to try and fix it. So everybody else is gonna have to figure out a way to fix it. And we all need to fix it, and that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other requests to speak on this item?
I have no more for this item.
Okay, anyone else wishing to make a public comment before we move on? Okay, close public comment then and move on to item 5, our consent agenda, consideration and possible acceptance of individual annual reports. If there's no discussion on the consent agenda, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. All right, have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Move on to item 6A, business of the day, presentation and update from One Truckee River. And we're lucky enough to have Iris here from One Truckee River to give us a presentation. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Oh, it skipped ahead there. Okay. For the record, my name is Iris Daly Papard. I'm the Partnership Coordinator for One Truckee River. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. I have about a 5-minute presentation for you that summarizes what One Truckee River is, speaks to our collective accomplishments and our current priorities, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. One Truckee River is a collaboration of public and private partners working together to ensure a healthy and thriving river connected to the Truckee Meadows community. Listed on this slide are some of our partners. Altogether, One Truckee River consists of 130 stakeholders and 17 active partners. 3 that are here today that I'd like to note that came to support One Truckee River, which is John Enlow from the Truckee Meadows Water Authority, Christy, I'm not going to say your last name, from Keep Truckee Meadows Beautiful, and Alicia Rubin from Nevada Land Trust. Okay, so this partnership developed the One Truckee River Management Plan over the course of many collaborative, in-depth meetings, retreats, and forums focused on the challenges and opportunities that exist connected to the Truckee River. The plan lays out the framework for long-term and sustainable management of the river. More specifically, the partnership identified 9 focus areas when developing the plan, and those are social issues, education, water quality, sustainable funding, stewardship, ecosystem, public safety, recreation, and quality of life. And I promise you, this is the only slide I'm reading directly from, but I think it really encapsulates what we're about. So the partnership took those 9 focus areas and developed 4 primary goals. 1 being to protect water quality, 2, create and sustain a safe, beautiful, and accessible river connected to people and places. 3, build an aware and engaged community that protects and cares for the river. And 4, ensures the measurable, sustainable, and collaborative management of the river for today and into the future. Once the plan was completed, all 3 jurisdictions unanimously voted to approve the plan in 2016. So what have we accomplished to date? Here is a list. I'm not going to read it, but you can view it. And in general, summarized, we did a lot of mapping, education, outreach, supported the passage of AB 379, and also the mile markers are along the river. Okay, so what are we focused on right now? In 2017, One Truckee River Partnership Council identified 9 action items to prioritize. Tonight, I'm just going to mention 3 to give you a sense of what we're working on. The first is to complete a multi-jurisdictional signage plan. For the past year, working with 3 jurisdictions under our River Safety and Signage Working Group, a Truckee River Master Signage Plan has been developed and is in the last stages of being finalized. And then it will move directly into implementation with funding already secured. Another one is to increase public restrooms along the Truckee River. As you can see on this map, Barbara Bennett Park in Reno to Rock Park in Sparks, that's not on the map, but as you continue, it is. There are 2 restrooms in those locations, but in between those 2 restrooms is a 3.5-mile gap in an urban area with no restrooms along the Truckee River. Last year, under our Housing and Sanitation Working Group with representatives from the City of Reno, City of Sparks, Community Foundation, Downtown Reno Partnership, and local residents, explored opportunities, challenges, and restroom types in detail, bringing this action item currently to be focused on establishing a pilot restroom project on Truckee Meadows Water Authority property near Broadhead Park when an additional partner is identified for the first stage. Last, but definitely not least, is the development of a regional watershed management plan. This is really important critical work for our region as it is directly connected to water quality with many partners engaged. The Truckee Meadows Stormwater Permit Coordinating Committee, where all 3 jurisdictions are represented, are leading the initiative. Complementary to this work is the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection Integrated Source Water Protection Efforts. So, we are here today to explore the possibilities of this collaborative partnership of One Truckee River working together more with the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency, as One Truckee River's work is related to natural resources and quality of life elements within the Truckee Meadows region. Thank you again for the opportunity to do this presentation, and as you know, you'll have, as you probably see, you have a summary of the plan in front of you, and I'll open it up for questions.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. Questions? Iris, what, in terms of the conversations that you've had and regional planning staff, what is the vision for collaboration between One Truckee River and TMRPA?
You know, honestly, our conversations haven't gotten that in depth. We felt that it was proper to come and do a presentation, was the first place to take off. So yeah, we haven't had much conversation of what that would look like outside of seeing the connection with your guys' work that we've heard about with natural resources and quality of life elements. But in detail, we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. I mean, is that something that we can, loop in as part of our regional plan update process that we're in right now to, create this synergy?
Oh, yeah, Mr. Chair, it's Jeremy Smith for the record, Team RPA. We have been working with RCI, Resource Concepts, Inc., and the WRWC to some degree, and then also I have attended some One Truckee River meetings and specifically kind of got tasked to be on the stormwater side of things. And so in the terms that we could potentially continue our work with source water protection, we have been awarded a grant from NDEP along those lines. And so when we get through the regional plan update adoption, which we all know is coming very soon, then we would move on to what we're going to hear a little bit about tonight, which is a natural resources plan aspect to try to really buff up our understanding of how we can implement natural resources in the plan. And I think that that's probably the realm within which we'll continue to explore how we can work together.
Great. That's fantastic. One more question. So the One Truckee River has looked at the segment that you had on the map, and I think originally that was the vision for phase 1. Has there been discussion in OTR of kind of what that, after the river management plan is developed, has there been contemplation of phase 2 with an extended area and what that might look like, and as we talk about these collaboration opportunities?
Yeah, from my understanding, it was discussed, and I'll just, for the record, I've been with One Truckee River for a year, and there's been a lot of history before I came on board, but my understanding is that it is to focus in the state of Nevada, and for right now, it's from McCarran to Sparks Boulevard. That's phase 1. And most definitely, we're looking to, they have identified areas for phase 2 and 3, but we're really focused on phase 1 right now.
Okay.
Yep.
Fantastic. Other questions? All right. Thanks again so much for being here, and thanks to KTMB and Nevada Land Trust and Tumwa for being here as well.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, well, let's move on then to 6B, which is a regional plan conformance review for Sierra Manor. Nate, welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, Nate Kusha, Team RPA. This presentation is for a regional plan conformance review for a City of Reno master plan amendment. That's case number CR 19-002, Sierra Manor. It can be found starting on page 115 of your packet. And the Reno City Council approved this master plan amendment on February 27th, 2019. On the screen above is a map showing the general location of the amendment site. This request includes an amendment to the City of Reno Master Plan to change the land use designations from 1.97 acres of large lot neighborhood and 1.93 acres of suburban mixed use to 3.9 acres of mixed neighborhood on 3 adjacent parcels. Here's a closer look at the subject site. As you can see, it's located in the City of Reno's portion of the TMSA. A portion of the amendment site is within the South Virginia Secondary Transit-Oriented Development Corridor. And according to the submitted materials, the proposed land uses would allow for increased residential density in an area where employment opportunities are nearby. The amendment site is subject to the City of Reno's concurrency management system that ensures adequate public facilities and infrastructure will be available at the time impacts from new development occur, as required by Policy 3.5.1 of the Regional Plan. And according to the submitted materials, necessary infrastructure to serve the property is currently in place in regards to water, sewer, and roads. Overhead is a map showing aerial imagery of the site. The site is adjacent to suburban mixed land uses on the north and east side and suburban residential uses to the south. The proposed mixed neighborhood designation is compatible with these surrounding uses, and the proposal submits maintaining roughly 1.93 acres of the current large lot neighborhood land use designation just to the south of the amendment site to provide a buffer between the Reno mixed neighborhood use and the Washoe County suburban residential to the south. Overhead is the review criteria for this conformance review, also found in your packet on page 116. And in relation to the goals and policies of the regional plan, staff has not identified any significant conformance issues of the proposed amendment and recommends approval based on consistency and/or compatibility with the factors listed in policy 4.1.3. You can find a suggested motion on the screen above or on page 118 of your packet. And this concludes my presentation. Myself, as well as City of Reno staff, are available for any questions you may have.
Great. Thanks very much, Nate. Before we get to questions, see if there's any public comment on this item.
I have none for this item.
Okay. Anyone wishing to make a comment on this item? All right, seeing none, bring it back to the commission for questions or discussion or a motion. Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the case of CR 19-002, Sierra Manor Master Plan Amendment, I move to find the Sierra Manor Amendment to the Reno Master Plan in conformance with the 2012 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan based on the findings listed in the staff report, and I can make all of the findings.
Great. Have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, great. Commissioner Peterson has the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thanks, Nate. We'll move on then to item 6A, a regional plan conformance review for a PRS Northern Nevada Sierra Medical Center. Chris, welcome.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, before
Yes,
we
Commissioner
get
Weisky.
into it, thank you, Commissioner Weisky. I need to recuse myself from this item as my employer has contracts, not on this project, but with the owner of this project, and so I will be sitting back from this agenda item.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Chris, when you're ready.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chris Tolley, Team RPA for the record. The case before you is a master plan conformance review for a City of Reno Master Plan Amendment and project of regional significance for the Northern Nevada Sierra Medical Center, case number CR 19-003 and CR 19-004 respectively. Here is the regional location map showing the location of the subject property. And then as shown on this aerial from 2016, the 22.2 acre site is bounded by Longley Lane to the west, Double R Boulevard to the east, and Innovation Drive to the south. And then to help visualize the request, here is a map of the PUD handbook. The site is currently designated mixed employment and is proposed to be designated public, quasi-public. Additionally, the proposal is considered a PRS for employment exceeds 938 employees, traffic exceeds 6,250 average daily trips, and sewage exceeds 187,500 gallons per day. The actual figures are shown on the right-hand side of the table on the slide. And then finally, the proposed hospital is anticipated to be built in 3 phases and will be approximately 350,000 square feet in size and provide a maximum of 262 beds. Additionally, there will be medical offices and a parking garage. Policy 4.1.3 of the regional plan identifies 6 factors that the RPC must consider related to the master plan conformance review and project of regional significance, which are listed on this slide. The subject site is surrounded by existing development and is considered infill. No portion of the amendment site is considered development constrained per the regional plan. This is a significant employee center and is appropriate as a PRS. Materials submitted by the City of Reno indicate that the public facilities and services will be available and adequate to serve the project. A number of traffic improvements would need to be made to mitigate potential impacts, primarily at the existing intersections. And finally, in relation to the goals and policies of the regional plan, regional planning staff has not identified any significant conformance issues and recommends approval of the proposal based on consistency and/or compatibility with the review factors listed in this policy. And you can find the suggested motion on the screen or on page 146 of your packet. This does conclude staff's presentation. TMRPA and City of Reno staff are available for any questions.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Chris. Before we get to commissioner questions, I'll ask for if there are any public comments.
None for this item.
Okay, thanks. Anyone wishing to make a public comment? All right, seeing none, bring it back to the commission for questions. No questions. Discussion or a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Vanderwell.
I move to find the Northern Nevada Sierra Medical Center amendment to the City of Reno Master Plan and Project of Regional Significance in conformance with the 2012 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan based on the finding listed in the staff report.
Okay,
Commissioner Chesney, second.
thank you very much. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. We'll move on then to our next item, which is 7A. No, it's not 7A. 6D, excuse me. Truckee Meadows Regional Plan Policies Workshop. So this is a continuation of our workshop that we had over at the City of Sparks 2 weeks ago. So Lauren is going to start us off, and then I'll jump in after Lauren and kind of give a preview of some minor changes of our format from last time. So Lauren, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, for the record, Lauren Knox with Regional Planning. So again, as Commissioner Gower just said, we're really picking up from the April 24th Regional Planning Commission workshop, where we began discussing draft version 1 of the 2019 Regional Plan policies. For reference, just as we did at the workshop, we're going to walk through the basics of the remaining sections. The polarizing items, as identified in the list of polarizing item sheet, are identified by a red flag on the slide. So again, we're going to use this feedback provided to help us to draft the next version of the 2019 Regional Plan policies. So as you may remember, we covered the population growth, regional form, and public facilities and service sections of the 2019 draft policies, and we have the natural resource section and the regional coordination section remaining. So before we start with the natural resource section, I'm going to turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. So I think that because we didn't offer Italian food this evening, we didn't get quite the same draw from folks. So, yeah, I know. So in terms of format for tonight, part of it is that there's no Italian food. And the other part of it is that just the venue doesn't allow for the same type of discussion that we had last time. So in terms of the format, Lauren's going to give us an update on the opening part of each section, so natural resources, and then the regional collaboration section. And then we'll open it up if there are any comments from the public, any comments from staff. That would be the opportunity for them to come up and provide us with that input. And then as commissioners, if we want to call them back up for follow-up questions or to get additional information, we'll still have that opportunity for dialogue as we move through these. I still want to go through each one policy by policy, so we can say that we've done that. We've looked at each one as we're required to do. So that is a preview of the format today. I think I captured everything. Yes. Okay. It's going to be Nate. Nate's the natural resources guy. I should have known that.
I'm not Lauren, so I hope you're all not disappointed, but go ahead and get started. So last time, like Lauren mentioned, we left off with the natural resources policies. So as part of the natural resources policies as they're drafted, we've identified the creation of a map to identify where these natural resources are. So this is actually something that NRS requires us to do, and we actually, after talking with jurisdictional staff, having some conversations, we anticipate that this will be moved to part of our work plan and be part of that development of that natural resources plan that Jeremy alluded to earlier. That'll be post-adoption of the update. We'll be working with various entities on that natural resources plan, which we hope will help to solidify a lot of the natural resources policies in the current plan. And we also are going to be coordinating with a lot of different entities to create that, trying to not be duplicative of what other entities are already doing and get everybody involved in the creation of this. And to really coordinate the natural resource and environmental management across the different entities in the region. It's a big part of it is going to be that natural resource plan. It's a big part of our work plan, along with the PIP that you all know so well about. As for the policies in the current draft of the draft policies, we broke policy 2.1.1 of the current regional plan up into multiple policies to kind of address each of those components that are listed in that policy more specifically. You can see above some of the things listed in that policy currently are open space, ridgelines, habitat, et cetera. There's a list of 15 or so items in the current policy. We kind of broke each one of those up into its own policy to give it more kind of credence. And we understand that the natural environment, natural resources section has been something that's popped a lot in our surveys with the community and with you guys as well and the governing board. So we're really trying to focus on it and really kind of beef it up. There were no specific controversial items that were identified in the natural resources policy section. However, we have received some feedback that the policies as drafted aren't quite strict enough, and the jurisdictional staff and others have felt that we should actually make them a little bit more strict. So we're working to tighten those up in the next draft of the policies. That's kind of the major stuff for the natural resource section. We have jurisdictional staff as well as staff from other entities. Washoe County Health District is here to answer or answer questions you guys may have on these policies, as well as us. So I'll turn it back to you guys.
Okay. Great, thanks, Nate. So let's get any public comment or jurisdiction or affected entity comments on the global section. And then, like I said, there's going to be the opportunity for subsequent questions and discussion as we go through the policies. No? Okay. Sienna.
For the record, Sienna Reed with the City of Reno, just very briefly, wanted to echo that the City of Reno really supports moving forward with language in the regional plan for a variety of these natural resources policies that really are much more directive in terms of what the local government master plans need to address and how. So we're looking forward to working through that process that Nate alluded to. We also acknowledge that there's additional work that is needed from the data perspective. A lot of natural resource data maybe isn't updated as frequently as other data sources, so we acknowledge that. And some of the policies you'll see really do set up kind of a future refinement in terms of taking a look at those policies with additional data that was alluded to in the TMRPA work program. So just wanted to note we're very supportive of that. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Sienna. All right.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, Daniel Inoue with the Washoe County Health District Air Quality Management Division. Just wanted to let you know where we stand with air quality today. The Environmental Protection Agency establishes health-based air quality standards. Our biggest challenge right now is with ozone. That's a summertime pollutant. The largest source is cars and trucks. So reducing the impact from cars and trucks, especially vehicle miles traveled, will go a long way toward us meeting the air quality standard. Many of the solutions to improve air quality overlap with many of the natural resources and other things and other goals and policies within the regional plan. So I'll be available for questions if you have something specific related to the air quality portion of the policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, I don't want to leave you out. Okay. All right, well, let's bring it back to the commission though, then, and we will start working through these. Natural Resources 1. Okay. NR 2. Yeah, please.
Hi, Jeremy Smith for the record again. Regarding NR1 and NR2, as Nate mentioned, NRS does contemplate us creating a map of natural resource areas. And to Sienna's point, where the data may be, and certainly our collection of data on these topics is probably a little bit dated and behind, I think we're looking at, in future drafts, to kind of combine NR1 and NR2. NR2 really contemplates the cooperative development of a natural resources plan aspect that will become like an appendix or an addendum to the regional plan itself. And first and foremost, I think among that will be trying to create that map. That'll be the goal. So just to kind of clarify where we're heading.
Mr. Chairman, with what Jeremy just said with regards to NR1 and NR2, and if NRS requires this, then we should note that we should strengthen that language to say that it, rather than should be protected, I mean, we should strengthen that language per the NRS.
Jeremy, what is, in NR2, what does TMRPA consider as the wider region?
Yeah.
Fantastic question. In the past, we've looked at a broader region as sort of the 5-county region that was in the Economic Planning Indicators Committee, for example, the EPIC study. We focus in Washoe County, but we know that the impacts that are happening around us obviously they're affecting us as well. So I think generally when we talk about the wider region, that's what goes into my mind, that 5-county region, which would be Carson City, Story, Washoe, Lyon, and Douglas.
Okay. So I know at one point the wider region was something different based on a map in the regional plan that, had that radius, and it captured, went as far out as Churchill County, Pershing County, I think even as far down to like Sacramento, capturing SACOG. I'm not saying that it should.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I'm definitely familiar with that sort of bullseye kind of map.
Yeah.
Since I've been with the agency, we haven't really done anything really outside of the state of Nevada. And obviously the hydrographic constraint there of the Tahoe Basin and the TRPA comes into play there as well. But certainly we acknowledge that Carson City is a close neighbor. We know that what's going on in Story County has huge impacts. Douglas is a smaller player, but still an important aspect, and Fernley clearly is, in Lyon County, pretty important. So I think that would be the focus, but if you'd like us to come up with a better, maybe a more data-driven way to kind of define that wider region in terms of natural resources, I think that could be a focus of that planning aspect of our work plan.
Okay. Well, and the reason I bring this up is it's particularly with natural resources, I think you make a good point, and hearing the presentation that we did from One Truckee River tonight, the linkage of that watershed from the Tahoe Basin all the way down to Pyramid Lake, for natural resources is potentially different than what you described, what could be the economic region. So just something to consider when we talk about wider region. Maybe it means different things in different contexts. Okay. Other questions on that or comments? No? Okay. NR3? No? Okay.
Is there a way, based on your last comment, is there a way in NR3 to integrate One Truckee River? When we talk about significant water base, just to have those programs work in concert with one another, is because based on your question, when the One Truckee River presentation was going on, if there's a way we can link it into this natural resource section. And I'm at a loss right now what that might be.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
Nate Kusha again for the record, Team RPA. We anticipate really working with One Truckee River as well as various other organizations with that NR2 policy and that natural resources plan. That's kind of where we see the connection at this point. The NR3 is really a carryover policy of our DCA layer development constraints areas.
Okay.
Nate, doesn't the DCA include recharge areas? No, that's not in the DCA layer?
No, it is not.
But are those areas considered?
We look at, in our conformance review evaluation, I think we look at some other environmental factors with that. It plays into our reviews, but they're not a strict constraint via the DCA layer itself.
So that could be something could evolve or develop as part of the natural resource planning process?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Jeremy Smith again, just to add to that, and the work we've been doing with RCI, really what we've been doing is creating a GIS viewer to help with the source water protection program, which is a voluntary program that's being sort of led by NDP. But it specifically contemplates mapping those recharge areas and then having them available as a visual when planners are looking to do their job and basically looking at projects coming in. So, I mean, certainly in that way, we will be continuing to identify those areas and make them available, try to make it easy to know where they are.
Great. All right, other discussion on NR3? How about NR4? Open space.
Mr. Chairman, when we ask question, or when we state should be preserved and maintained for staff, what does that actually mean?
Nate Kusha for the record again. Yeah, these are the policies that we I kind of referenced earlier, is about a lot of should, encourage. There's quite a few policies in here. That's an approach we took to try to break these out, kind of making policies that we're not maybe quite sure how to implement yet. We've heard from all the jurisdictions really that they would like a little bit tighter language on that, about exactly how we would require them to implement. We're going to, at this point, leave that to their jurisdictions, hopefully refine that through the Natural Resources Plan, but put more language in that's closer to something of must be addressed in their respective master plans and things like that.
Yes, I would support that. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Chvilicek, I had the same comment on that one, that it just seems, it's very broad. And without that language in there that the master plans should incorporate, these specific items related to open space protection, that I'm not really sure what we're achieving by it. Okay, if there's no other discussion on that, how about NR5? No? Okay. NR6? Again, just the same comment as NR4, that, working on strengthening that language and being a little bit more prescriptive of what we're trying to achieve by having something in the master planning documents. Okay, NR7? I have the same comment on that.
Yes. Okay, make it tighter.
One. Kind of a theme. How about NR8? So NR8 and NR9, I think this is something that I'm really concerned about at the regional level and in some of the projects and proposals that we've seen at the City of Reno level related to development and the wildland-urban interface. And, you know, just based on what we've seen recently in California, and this is a huge issue with development and, you know, increasing potential for impacts from wildfire. So I really think that out of all the things in this section, this really needs to not only be strengthened, but we need to work with entities to develop strategies to address this concern.
I would, if I may, I would concur that, I mean, there are strategies there that each of the jurisdictions can add into their master plans about specifically to wildfire risk mapping and even standards into what can and cannot be put in these areas, meaning building structure, building material. Because today is the 6-month anniversary of Camp Fire, so it's ever present in our minds.
And I would just add to that, that as a starting place, defining the wildland-urban interface is probably pretty important. Okay, other discussion, comments on that? Nope. Okay, how about NR10? No? I would just add to that one that I think there's an opportunity, again, with the One Truckee River presentation that we had, to really call out the Truckee River in this one. And when we talk about, you know, the creation of a network of parks, green belts, recreational trails, I know the One Truckee River really contemplates a linear park as kind of an ultimate goal of implementing their management plan. So if there's an opportunity to call that out, I know that the City of Reno master plan has that contemplated within it, but it'd be nice to see. And I apologize, I don't know if Sparks does, or the county, but putting that in there. Yeah, Jeremy.
Yeah, so Jeremy Smith again for the record. This is an area where we have been actually engaged in some work, some planning work right now, and again, it's sort of mapping oriented, but we've partnered with the Eastern Sierra Trails Coalition and EDON and several other partners, including the Sierra Club, Forest Service, the City of Reno, City of Sparks, and Washoe County, to look at a regional trails plan, the Truckee Meadows Trails planning effort that's underway right now. For example, last night I was at the McKinley Arts Center. We had a public workshop. There were several maps. People came and put dots on the map and left comments about trails they use, trails they'd like to see implemented, or social trails maybe that are unsustainable that they'd like to see taken away. And the idea really is to, along the lines of what we saw from the One Truckee River, looking at ways to create consistent signage and a consistent experience on trails and try to connect folks that are working and living in the urban areas through the trail network to the trails that exist all around us, in our Forest Service lands and to some degree in the BLM. So we're engaged in that, and we've been working with the spaghetti to try to get down to the actual trails that are system trails and system paths that are maintained, and we've been making good progress. So I believe right now you can go to the website we've propped up with the help of Joe and some of the others at Team RPA to it's tmtrails.org. And so you could check into that. There's a survey that will be available from our MetroQuest survey that we've been leveraging a lot. And also, an online map is forthcoming. So, yes, so that's part of that, and we hope to really use that as one of the linchpins for that plan moving forward.
Great. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, let's move on. NR 11. I just had one comment on this one, and I mentioned it to Kim and Jeremy and Nate when we met on this, but where it says improve the urban heat island, I don't think we want to improve the urban heat
No, we
island. I
do
think we want to
not.
reduce it.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, from the last 2 weeks ago when we met, when we talked about you mentioned climate resiliency and infrastructure and school placement, but if we could also address climate resiliency, and it might be in NR11 in terms of, because we're wanting to reduce that heat island and just build in more climate, we're supportive of climate resiliency.
Daniel, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this one, but I know the ozone advance
Yeah.
contemplates urban heat island and how the intensification of that effect influences ozone.
Sure. Commissioners, Daniel Inoue, Washoe County Health District Air Quality Management. In our Ozone Advance program, we have 5 goals to improve ozone concentrations. One is to reduce the impacts from on-road motor vehicles. Number 2 is to address off-road motor vehicles. 3 is related to urban heat island. 4th is energy efficiency with buildings. And the 5th one, and what I really enjoy, is to educate and empower leaders to make good decisions. So going back to the urban heat island, how that affects air quality, it affects it directly. It gives ozone a little head start during the day to form. So we start from a higher baseline and then just build from there as far as ozone concentrations go. On the benefit side, urban heat island increases the energy demand for cooling, not only for buildings, but also for cars. When you have a hotter car sitting in a parking lot, it requires more air conditioning, which is a bigger load on your car, which increases the load on your engine, increases the load on, or increases emissions as well. So these are all connected. Urban heat island is integrated in a lot of different solutions. Going back to the NR10, that could be a great companion with the urban heat island, basically having that backbone of an active transportation network to have cool islands and cool corridors to not only have those opportunities for recreation, but more importantly, or additionally, to have those to replace trips that would otherwise been taken by cars. So urban heat island can fit into a lot of different items related to air quality and quality of life. Did I
No, that's
touch on your
fantastic.
question there?
And just from, go ahead.
If, in terms of, here thank you, you talked about expanding the urban tree canopy, but couldn't there also be, I'm very familiar with Seattle with rooftop gardens and stuff in terms of how that cools the environment, so could we even include that kind of statement instead of, I know such as expanding urban tree canopy, but we could include rooftop garden or rooftop landscaping, you know, because Seattle has, it's amazing, and so.
I think that's a great idea. We can figure out a way to hopefully work that in there. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, can I jump in? Some of the comments that we provide on some development proposals looks at cool roof technology, all the way from just a lighter shade of roof to vegetation on top of that. So cool islands, cool walls, cool roofs. It's a large toolbox of things that we can use in this community.
Yeah, and I think that's the really important point, is that there is a toolbox available, and it's not only identifying the tools that are in that toolbox, but making the connection between, okay, why are we even considering these in the first place? It's because they have benefits on VMT, they have benefits on, you know, the urban heat island, and ultimately, you know, our natural environment and quality of life for the region. So I think it's that why component too, that doesn't just have to live kind of outside of the plan in terms of context. I mean, I think the why can be built into the policies themselves. So when someone reads this, when it's being looked at as part of a conformance review or update of a master plan or whatever, that the why is there. So we know that. Okay,
call.
Great. NR 12. Daniel, don't go too far because this one's on air quality.
Been waiting 2 weeks for this.
Are we doing enough in this policy?
What's that? I'm
Are we
sorry.
doing enough in this policy?
We can always do better. If you look at vehicle miles traveled and you track that with our ozone concentrations, it really mirrors that. And that same curve reflects also the economy. So we had higher or a better economy in 2008, 2009. We also had quite a bit of VMT at that time compared to the recession. And also our ozone concentrations were up there also. During the recession, ozone concentrations actually improved. Most of that was related to the economy and actually the downturn and the recession, which also resulted in fewer vehicle miles traveled. So vehicle miles traveled is a good indicator for our ozone concentrations in this area. So again, we can always do better. When you look at policies to improve air quality, vehicle miles traveled would be the key thing to look at.
Okay, great. Jeremy, yeah.
Thank you. Jeremy Smith again. So, I mean, a lot of these things, as we talked about with the urban heat island, and, you know, this is no exception with the ozone, they're intertwined. And I think that we saw through the scenario exercise we did and the impacts with regard to sort of measuring the differential impacts of the different patterns, that the preferred scenarios, the infill scenario, and to some degree smart greenfield, although McCarran actually performed better, VMT was actually lowered in the transportation demand model. And so the concept that we've put in the regional form policies that we've already covered helps reinforce this in terms of setting aside tier 2 lands on the edges and attempting to really focus in priority of investment and as much growth as we can into the core of our community so that folks aren't having to drive as much, or that's hopefully working together.
Great.
Mr. Chairman, in NR 12, and maybe this is more of a question for you, one, if we are out of compliance with air quality, then there's a big price to pay, right? I mean, so I'm thinking this can be stronger so we don't ever get to that place.
We can look at it a couple different ways. The biggest message that we can share with us not meeting the air quality standard is our air is not healthy to breathe. You know, that's it. You know, if that's not strong enough reason to improve air quality, then I don't know what is. A second impact, and this would be economic, and this would be long-term economic. If we were designated to be a non-attainment area and we continue to be a non-attainment area, then future businesses in the future may look to areas outside of Washoe County to expand or relocate. We had a discussion like this with the Reno Planning Commission recently, and you know, when we talk about if we don't get our act together, other areas may look more attractive for economic development. We can say that, oh, this is maybe a discussion that they had in California maybe 40 years ago. Just replace Idaho, Washington, Story County with, well, you get the message. So we in Nevada, and especially Washoe County in northern Nevada, have benefited from the air quality issues in California.
So Jeremy or others, I mean, do you have you thought about strengthening that language to include, so we're not, you know, hitting that threshold which would bring everything to a screeching halt? So how,
Well,
again,
yeah,
I
we
don't have any magic words.
Sure, yeah, we've worked with Daniel a little bit. Again, back to sort of the scenario outlook. I'm not totally familiar with all of the components, but the MOVES model was run, I believe, on all 4 scenarios. And I think there are some assumptions in there with regard to fuel emissions efficiency standards on cars going forward, and also the prevalence of electric vehicles that helped, I think all 4 of our scenarios actually, from that perspective, remained in attainment. But absolutely, I think we could work with Daniel to see how we could strengthen this to help support what he's trying to do to keep us there.
Right, if I can,
And then even if each of the jurisdictions in their master plans also include language to support reduction of vehicle miles traveled or even, multimodal work within their communities and such. So it
yes.
works in concert.
And certainly, our work with the Regional Transportation Commission also contemplates that too, so we would
Okay.
work to keep that going, but.
Right. A couple things I can add is we historically have had a problem with carbon monoxide and PM10, or particulate matter. And we were a non-attainment area. To get back into attainment, we had really strong programs related to oxy-fuel programs for cars, our wood stove program that's been around for 30 years, and we've just got great improvement. We meet the standard. But also, tied in with that, because we were a non-attainment area, we had to develop a maintenance plan to ensure or to prove to EPA that we will maintain the standard for 2 10-year periods. Tied in with that maintenance plan is a motor vehicle emissions budget. That ties in with the regional transportation plan. So within the regional transportation plan, there's a transportation conformity section that ties in with the motor vehicle emissions budget. The RTP and the RTIP need to conform to the air quality plan and the motor vehicle emissions budget before FHWA can check the box that says, hey, the RTP is approved. But moving forward, if we needed to develop a plan on the ozone side, it would require a lower amount of vehicle miles traveled in the regional transportation plan. So, we can do it voluntarily, and that's what we're really encouraging. If we become a non-attainment area, need to develop that plan, need to develop that motor vehicle emissions budget, most likely it's going to be a reduction in vehicle miles traveled. And something else I wanted to add about some comparisons between water and air, somewhat similar, but some big differences. If there's a water deficit, there's an option of bringing in water. If the water quality isn't meeting the standards, you can treat the water. But with air quality, once it's out of the tailpipe, that's it. So we have to take that or handle that on the front end of things compared to water.
Exactly.
Commissioner Hawkins?
A year and a half ago, we spoke at the Reno Planning Commission about the emissions from vehicles and the state allowing classic rods and classic vehicles to run without getting smogs. Can we address that and get serious this time?
Locally, we have not been able to address it. It's something that is to be addressed at the state level. There was some legislation, or I think there is currently some legislation related to doing odometer checks on a regular basis. Within that, there could be a component to check the mileage to make sure that they are complying with that 5,000 miles per year. But it is a known problem, let's say, as far as enforcement goes. We're encouraging, and these are some of those things that we want to get a handle on before we were designated to be non-attainment. So these are some of those easy things that we can do. So nothing has been completed right now, but we are definitely working on it in the background.
Thank you.
Great. One more comment that I had, and it goes with this kind of block, NR10 through NR12. And I brought it up at the last meeting, and it goes with multimodal, but it's connectivity. We talk about regional form and pattern, and we can promote infill development all we want. I mean, Ranchero was a great example of infill development in the city of Reno, but we had lengthy discussions at the city about the connectivity of that development with the surrounding development. If it's a completely walled-in development with no pedestrian connectivity to adjacent areas, then one would have to drive all the way out and around to literally go 300 feet, drive a mile to go 300 feet. So connectivity, in addition to form and pattern, it has to be included in here, because otherwise we're not going to include, or we're not going to achieve the VMT milestones or reductions and multimodal opportunities without it.
Absolutely.
Agree?
Right. Okay. I feel better having said that.
Good.
Any other comments on NR 10 through 12? Okay, how about, we'll move on to the water ones then, NR 13. Nope.
Other, and it may not fit here, but this is one I keep bringing up, is stormwater runoff.
Yeah. $15? 16?
Got to ask one question.
Sure, yeah.
A few years ago, I went to that NEMO. It was presented by Tumwa and University of Nevada Extension. What can happen again? I mean, it was all grant funded. I mean, is that what we're stuck at? We can't give the class anymore? Because that was a really informative class.
So are you suggesting jurisdictions support continuing education on
I think so.
NEMO or
We need it.
Quell, or, I mean,
Yeah.
Related to NR 16, one of the things that we've been talking about at the city, and I think it fits in here, what Daniel's been talking about with the ozone advance, is the electrification of the vehicle fleet and providing EV-ready building infrastructure. And this is just a matter of having 220 in your garage, basically. It's EV-ready. But, you know, potentially if local governments want to go a step further, then there's that opportunity. But teeing that up and creating that vision in the regional plan, it seems like we have that opportunity to do so here, since that's an emerging technology, not only on the natural resource side, but on the economic side. I mean, we want to be a community that's, you know, our housing stock and our commercial development has that opportunity available.
so when you're saying fleet stocks, are you like the jurisdictions and maybe the school district and such? Electrifying those fleets?
Well, really, like when a tentative map comes in saying, okay, you've got 40 units, having a
EVs,
yeah, EV ready. So those units are, the developer and then the builder has put the 220 in the garage, and then if the builder wants to pop in some, you know, charging infrastructure, then opportunities there. It's just getting ahead of that, you know, that curve. How about NR 17? No? Okay, anything that we didn't discuss that you wanted to see included in the natural resources section themes? Commissioner Hawkins.
Sustainability. I didn't hear much on that, if anything. I mean, we're all looking at the carbon footprint, and we still have to get our class from City of Reno on sustainability. There's not enough talked about it, and that's the biggest thing coming on right now is sustainability and making a smaller carbon footprint. And I think that needs to be put in this, in the natural resources.
Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to say thank you to Nate. I think that his original comments and explanation of natural resources, which we've gone through component by component, was awesome. You're spot on when you said that there are some issues and the entities have gotten together and getting, you know, prepared to discuss them and tighten some things up. And then as we go through them, I hear comment after comment after comment, yes, this word should be changed. Yes, this should be more stringent. And the reason that I'm sitting back tonight as an individual commissioner and not saying anything is because I'm waiting for that document to be brought forward to us, because it is not my job or our job to lead this discussion, but instead to approve it and help the direction after we see the direction that's being laid out. So I just wanted to share my comments and my feelings tonight on that, although the conversation and discussion has been great, and I think it's spot on. And I see us as the Regional Planning Commission doing more in the very near future, similar to what the public asked us to do an hour and a half ago under public comment with, we are the mothership, if you will, to borrow a word from Tammy. And what I see happening is going to be exactly that. A question I have for staff on a global of this policy and the others that we're looking at, will some of the final policies cause each jurisdictional entity to have to revise their master plans if they aren't, if they don't have the same type of wording for certain policies for approvals? In other words, I would hate to see a city or the county bring a project forward that meets their master plan agreements, but their master plan, and then it doesn't meet regional. So how is that going to work, and is that what's going to happen? The three entities will go back and revise as necessary and upgrade their master plans?
Yeah, looks like Lauren wants to take a stab at it, but then I
Okay.
can weigh in after.
Thank you.
Great, for the record, Lauren Knox. So state law actually requires that once we adopt or update a regional plan here, the local government master plans and facilities plans, affected entities, master plans and facilities plans as well, have to come in for a review for conformance. So at that time, we then look at what it is that we develop in the 2019 plan compared to what the master plan or facilities plan that's been submitted to us is. And then we recognize that yes, it's in conformance, or no, it's not because it's missing this language, or we go through that analysis at that point in time, yes. And in developing these policies, we are trying to work very closely with the local governments in terms of what their master plans and facilities plans do have to help us guide kind of that piece. But yes, there may be some instances where we adopt some language in the regional plan that needs to then be carried forward through the local government's master plans. So that comes in after the update's completed.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Great questions and comments. Okay. I appreciate, before we move on, just want to say I appreciate Commissioner Weiske's comments on this and noting the evolving nature of this section. I do want to say, though, that I think getting the commission's feedback on some of the concerns and themes that the commissioners are interested in, getting the feedback from Daniel on the air quality piece is really important as these policies do evolve. And just to follow up on Commissioner Hawkins and Commissioner Chivilicek's points on sustainability and climate change, I mean, those themes were not in here. And as one commissioner out of 9, I can say that even given the evolving nature of this document and the development of that natural resources plan, I will not vote to move this document forward if the natural resources section does not include policies related to climate vulnerability, climate resiliency, wildland-urban interface, and the discussion relative to air quality and connectivity. So that's my feedback.
Understood clearly.
Okay.
He won't be the only one.
All right, well, let's move on then to, if there's no other discussion or comments on that one, let's move on then to regional coordination.
All right, so the regional coordination section really focuses on a few main features. So it discusses annexations and spheres of influence. For the most part, the annexation policy that is in the draft policies is carried over from the 2012 regional plan. And the sphere of influence policy is really based off of the 2012 plan wording with some minor amendments for criteria for sphere of influence expansion, which was really altered based on the discussion of decoupling the Truckee Meadows service areas with these spheres of influence. The regional coordination section also contains findings for regional plan amendments and conformance reviews, amended based on the new policy concepts. And then the regional coordination section also has the Truckee Meadows annual report concept, which is identified as a way to really understand the implementation of the regional plan and drive towards understanding region-wide impacts. In terms of polarizing items for the regional coordination section, the spheres of influence has really been a big discussion point at this time in regards to the timing, location, and size of the spheres of influence areas, the relation of the spheres of influence areas to the annexation programs, and the extraterritorial jurisdiction component of spheres of influence. So again, that's the polarizing issue on this piece. I'm available for questions. And we also obviously have staff available and effectivity staff.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lauren. Well, let's jump into it. RC1 and RC2, annexation and spheres of influence.
Mr. Chairman. In terms of the polarizing issues, when we talk about, we have, there are master plan amendments out there that I call zombie MPAs because they've been out there for a very, very long time and nothing has been done on them for years and years and years. And then people are asking to say that they want them to continue to be large. I mean, having a 20-year time frame, which I think is unreasonable. And, you know, because when it was approved, just use as an example, if something was approved in 2008 and we're now in 2019, we had different standards back then, but that all still applies to that MPA, and then nothing's moving forward on. So if there's a way that we could tier it in such a way that something has to be done with those zombie MPAs to say, what are you going to do with them? And I think the time frame for SOIs, I think we need to tighten that up a bit. And there should be an enforceable expiration date on MPAs that haven't had anything done on them.
Okay. Other discussion on those? Yeah, Commissioner Weisky.
I don't disagree with Commissioner Javilicek's concept, but I question whether or not we're allowed to do that by state law. And so maybe an update from our legal at a future point would be an opportunity
Certainly.
to find out if we can deal with that at a local level or if it needs to be promoted and dealt with at a state level.
Mr. Chairman, Jessica Prunty for the record. I am adding that to my list of items to report back to you upon, so, which will be coming shortly, hopefully at the next meeting.
Thank you. Okay, other conversation on that topic? Okay, how about RC3?
Mr. Chair, were we going to ask for any comments from local government before going through these? Or are we going to go through them?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to do that on the front end. Thank you for doing that. I apologize. Jim, you said you didn't want to make any comments on the last one, so I just assumed, you know, that on this one, but I didn't. I just skipped over it. I apologize.
I guess I would contest that what was just discussed, master plan is exactly what you would want for the 20-year horizon. I think that that's what your regional plan actually identifies as a 20-year planning horizon. So to identify what the master plan would be in 20 years would be a good thing, if you ask me. The neighbors and residents, when they invest in an area, they'd like to have a level of comfort on what would be there in 20 years. So I'd just like the Planning Commission to consider that, I suppose. If that's what you're asking Commissioner Gower on, or Chairman Gower on, what was just discussed or discussed overall for spheres of, in terms of spheres of influence, Sparks does support the decoupling of the TMSA with the spheres of influence. The spheres of influence would just be left as they are currently. There's still some things that the three jurisdictions are working out in terms of decoupling and spheres of influence and how that would all work. We haven't come to an entire agreement, so it would be premature to discuss it in a public format, but I do believe there's substantial ground being made at the working group level in terms of all of these policies, including regional coordination. I don't think I have anything else, and that's all I have to say about that.
Thanks, Jim.
And do you have a box of chocolates?
That's all I have to say about it. Sienna, do you want to add anything? Sorry I skipped over that.
For the record, Sienna Reed, City of Reno, just very briefly wanted to echo that we do have some concerns about the current sphere of influence policies as they're drafted. If the regional plan ultimately moves in a direction where the TMSA is not connected to the sphere and there's specific land designations that are really controlling what happens within the TMSA, we don't necessarily think that the sphere of influence should also be linked to those land designations. So that's something that we've brought up and we're continuing to work through. And as Jim alluded to, definitely having a lot of good, productive conversations there. So we'll look forward to continuing on that path.
Great. Remind me that we need to circle back to that point when we talk about timing at the end of this discussion.
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may add to, in terms of, and this is probably more of a question for council on your ever-growing list over there, in terms of right now on timeframe for SOIs, is in statute, is it 7 years?
If I may, Mr. Chair. So in terms of spheres of influence, statute actually allows the regional plan to set what the time frame is for a sphere of influence. The 7-year number that you're referencing is really about the programs of annexation for Reno and Sparks. So they're two different things, but the regional plan actually designates that time frame. It's been 20 years in the past. That's kind of what we utilized carrying forward, but that is a part of the regional plan that we're able to designate.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Commissioner Chesney.
Yeah, Lauren, what is the current time limit for sphere of influence?
It's currently 20 years. How we have it right now is the TMSA, which is the Truckee Meadows service area. There's actually 3 areas, and they are 20-year timeframes. So the spheres of influence have been 20 years in the past, and that's how we've drafted it in the 2019 plan as well, so far.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments, discussion? Okay, RC4. RC5. My question on RC5 is more of a procedural question in terms of the mechanism. So local government jurisdictions shall transmit proposals to TMRPA. What does that look like?
So there's currently a process that exists where we are on basically a distribution list for certain projects, so they do come to us. In the past, we have not been involved in providing comments, but we're trying to utilize a system that already exists to try and get in earlier and be able to provide some of this information and really start to talk about these things a little bit earlier in the process.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we've talked about a lot is, leveraging the data, the information that TMRPA has, almost serving as a, objective third party or a consultant, providing that cumulative information and on development proposals and just giving more information on the front end of projects that we can all use sitting on our respective planning commissions to help inform our decisions. So I think this is a really important policy. I was just curious of, how that was going to be implemented, if it was going to be a requirement, if it was going to be, we're here, but only if you, knock on our door, or,
We can certainly talk about kind of strengthening that maybe if it's more of a requirement versus you may transmit it. So we can definitely maybe look at amending that language and look at those processes a little bit clearer.
Okay, yeah, that would be great to have
Comment
that.
a little bit to that. Here's Jeremy Smith again. I think we saw it in the discussion around the PRS for the schools and the I think, valid concerns from the school district that they get so far down the road, and then there's a regional planning issue that, creates havoc at the end of the process. Why not have that known up front? And so I think we will probably need to have more discussion about how we identify exactly which projects we really need to comment on. But to my knowledge, we haven't never commented early on really anything. So even that is a step in the right direction. And then second to that would be the access to our annual reporting mechanism, which will be an online dashboard as well, that you could, basically, if we're going to start using some of those cumulatively tracked metrics as one of the conformance pieces, you could actually go in and see right away if you feel like what you're going to propose would trigger something.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Jeremy.
Sure.
Okay, if there's nothing else on that one, let's move on to RC6. My comment on this one is a question. Is this really a policy or is it a definition?
So in the 2012 plan, it exists as a policy, so we kind of carried it over and tried to provide some clarification on the phasing of projects of regional significance, because there have been questions regarding whether certain phases, if they're separated out into phases, and each phase doesn't trigger a PRS, but the total project does, is it considered one or not? So we try to be a little bit clear about that. It exists now. It could certainly be a definition. I think we were just trying to be clear and upfront that we need to see projects of regional significance, and here's what they are, because they are a significant part of our conformance review.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, how about RC7?
Mr. Chairman, I think in terms of, and it goes, could connectivity fit into here in these little bullet set points? And then again, stormwater runoff.
Yeah, for me, this seemed like a kind of a catch-all policy that the regional plan is promoting all of these great things, and a lot of them are, they're pretty aspirational, and they, I didn't really feel like they had well-defined terms, but I know that that's going to be fleshed out a little bit, and this information is found in other policies, so I guess that kind of led me to believe, do we want this as a policy in this location, or is this something that is more like the goals in the 2012 regional plan, or those statements that are at the very front end of the document that say, this is what the regional plan is all about. So it's similar to the last one, where does this information live? Is it appropriate as a policy, or is it more of a contextual piece?
Got it.
Okay, RC8. And my comment on this is cumulative impacts is something that we talked about all the time. We see it in our conformance reviews, and this is kind of where it landed. And I think we need to do a little bit more than this of addressing those impacts. And I know that's a beast to work with, but I know that we can work through that.
Absolutely. If I could speak to that quickly, I think that, again, the annual reporting mechanism and the periodicity to which we can update what we're tracking through the year, I think will help us to contextualize any given project in terms of what we've been doing so far. Possibly we always look back a year, or maybe it's 3 years. In terms of, back to RC7, really poorly worded, low land utilization is really about acres consumed, and maybe acres of what type. And so every time something gets approved, if we can be tracking that, then that's the kind of information that you guys could have when someone comes in and says, now we want to do this. change, the master plan land use, you can look at it in the context of that accumulating impact, basically.
Well, then I think the next step is taking that tool and turning it into a policy and saying, okay, this tool is available, regional planning has developed it. Now, to determine cumulative impacts at the local level, at the regional level, local governments, affected entities will use that tool to determine cumulative impacts to help inform the decision-making process. I mean, I think that's the next step of the policy. I'm not saying consider those impacts, but use this mechanism to determine those impacts.
Got it.
Okay. Moving on to RC 9. No. RC 10. No. RC 11. RC 12. For RC 12, why do we have these 6 bullets? And
only, yeah.
why, I guess, why do these 6 rise to the level of being included?
Yeah, so these 6 bullets, they started off with the 2012 regional plan in terms of what we have for creating committees, but they also very much follow what NRS requires be in the regional plan. So in terms of talking about annexations, intergovernmental relations, natural resources, so we tried to kind of follow that structure and not stray too far out of the realm of where we're supposed to be with regards to regional planning. We can certainly, obviously, add more, though.
Okay. I think that affordable housing is one that could land on that list. And something related to sustainability. I know that kind of falls under natural resources, but sustainability and climate resiliency. Okay, RC 13, last one. Lauren, how is RC 13 consistent with our master plan?
Exactly.
What do you mean consistent with our master plan?
Excuse me, our regional plan
Okay,
and our statutes.
I see. So RC 13 is actually a carryover policy from the 2012 regional plan. We know that there have been discussions about the federal lands bill and trying to work down that path, and so we decided to keep it from the 2012 plan because there are kind of discussions about it. In terms of how it is part of the contents of the regional plan in terms of NRS, it's kind of that intergovernmental relations and intergovernmental coordination piece.
Maybe you could add a little further than that, Jeremy Smith. Also, I mean, the disposal of federal lands would have an impact on where development could occur in the region. And this regional plan is a growth management strategy that we work together to have. And so I think what this policy, and maybe the language needs some cleanup, but contemplates that our agency would be involved in discussions around that sort of federal lands type action in terms of how it would impact, say, the regional plan and the different land designations that we have, that sort of thing, just that we would be at the table.
Also, additionally, federal lands are part of the development constraints area, and that's a pretty beefy part of the regional plan, shall I say. So it is kind of related in that piece as well. If those lands turn, it does have an impact on our DCA layer.
Yeah.
So I guess the heart of my question is if one of the purposes of the regional plan is to promote the preservation of open space and the efficient growth, getting the exact words, if federal lands are predominantly located on the exterior areas of the TMSA, then if we dispose of those lands, one, how are we protecting open space? And two, how are we promoting efficient urban form and pattern?
Absolutely, and maybe that comes to the kind of wording in the policy. What we're attempting to do is get in on those conversations because it does have an impact on all those pieces. So making sure that we're kind of in on the loop on those is important to us, I think. So maybe the wording does need to be amended a little bit to better reflect kind of the why.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, because because right now it seems it's in conflict. And in terms of all of the exercises we've gone through for almost the last 2 years, by incorporating this, it's in conflict. And even your own projections say we have enough land. So,
Yeah, the intent of the policy, as I understand it, was not to promote federal lands bills, but to promote that the regional planning agency participates if such a bill is being presented or crafted. In order to, bring the planning principles and the growth management principles of the plan that we've all been working on to bear on that process, such that, at some point in the future, it could be possible that we might need some of that. But it seems a long way off based on the data work we've done. So we just, I think, want to make sure that we're at the table to provide that information and help, help guide the discussion to some degree. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, what precludes TMRPA from being at the table now?
I don't know that anything precludes it, but
But we're going to try and tell the federal government that they're going to listen to us and make us part of the discussion rather than being able to be at every table? I mean, at any discussion?
Well, it was more about, I think, the intergovernmental coordination piece that Lauren mentioned. Previously, we just weren't really involved in the crafting of those.
So is that a policy or is that a goal of TMRPA? To me, it sounds like a goal, and that's what I'm getting at, Jeremy, to me, it sounds like a goal that staff wants and should have and be participating in. 100% behind that. But is it something that becomes a finding or policy for future in our master plan? And that, unless I'm missing a piece, and you can always explain that to me anytime you want.
Well, I don't know that you're missing anything. No, I wouldn't say that. I just think that, if it's hard to, theoretically, a lands bill could be an end run around what we're trying to do here with the regional plan. That's basically what we want to try to forestall. And so I don't know exactly how, maybe the mechanism, maybe this isn't it, but I just think that we need to make sure that our regional plan, the context we're building for growth management, is considered before we, go off and try to acquire the ability to dispose of more federal lands, especially given, we're trying to work towards, building in the core, protecting our natural resources, all those sorts of things. So I think just, you may be right, it might be a goal that we get involved in it, and maybe it isn't sort of a finding in those terms. We're going to reevaluate that language then and see if we can figure that out.
Just a suggestion to Commissioner Weiske's point, I think we don't have the ability to insert ourselves in the federal government process. If they reach out to us as a cooperating agency as part of an NEPA process or something like that, then sure, we can provide that specialized input. But the authority that this agency does have is encouraging or requiring the jurisdictions to involve the TMRPA or to seek input from the TMRPA when considering federal lands bill. So that process, and I could be way out of line here, but as I understand it, requiring the entities to consult and get that information relative to regional form and pattern, open space, how those decisions, public land disposal would affect the things that the regional planning agency, is all about.
Exactly.
And having that information available. Commissioner Weiske?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeremy, I think that based upon the work that staff has done over the last 2 years and the amount of information that you have now developed, the maps that you guys have developed, the processes that weren't there in the past and are here now and that are going to be maintained into the future, you are going to be a desired component in upcoming discussions, where before you weren't considered because you didn't have that information. Now you're bringing something to the table. You're bringing a major piece to the table for future development. And oh, by the way, since we're here, here's what our master plan policies are. And I think that's how it's going to get integrated very shortly. But in the past, TMRPA hasn't been known for that valuable information piece of the puzzle. So just my opinion.
All right. Anything that commissioners want to add to the regional collaboration section? Jim or Sienna, anything you want to add to it? No? Okay. Lauren?
Well, we made it through all 5 sections, so we just wanted to leave space for if there's anything else we want to discuss with regards to those sections or policies as we go away to draft the next plan or the next version of these policies.
He said remind you.
Yeah, so if there's no additional feedback, before we leave this item, I just want to talk a little bit more about timeline. Jim mentioned that staff working group is plugging away at these policies. Can you give the commission an idea of what the timeline looks like for those updated policies?
Well, at the Regional Planning Governing Board meeting that happened the night or the day after we had the last part of this workshop, there was a vote taken that we should have a full draft of the regional plan. They basically said we extend the deadline for about 2 months, kind of similar to what you guys mentioned, into August, maybe September, but have a full draft of the updated policies and all the context information in the whole thing, at least 2 weeks prior to a meeting where that would be presented in a public setting for an administrative review for staff, so that we could make sure that, if those folks had a chance to weigh in and see that. And so that we're planning for, I believe, basically mid-August to have that done, and hopefully sooner. But, these things go. So we're pushing for that as a deadline so that we can have a series of meetings, I think, with this body and the Regional Planning Governing Board at the end of August to then present that in a public forum.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman? So in terms of, because of our maps 1 and 2, so those will be coming back to us as you review, incorporate everything that we've done in these policies.
Correct, yeah, I would say that I echo the statements from staff. I'm super encouraged by where we've been getting in the Regional Plan Update Working Group. We have a meeting tomorrow. Everyone has submitted map boundaries in terms of the regional form map, and so we're gonna have that discussion for 2 hours tomorrow. There's gonna be portive subs, so if you're really interested,
Italian, but
get a
it's
sandwich there. No Italian, but it is during lunch. So yeah, we're I think we've gotten a ton of comments. I mean, we often talk about what we want to do now is sort of just write the darn thing based on all this feedback we've gotten, and then allow for this administrative review and move it along.
In other words, you're tired of hearing from us.
No, that's not what I mean. We just want to hear from you on the next version.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any comment on that? Okay. We are going to leave that item then. Thanks so much, you guys. Great work. Thanks to the commissioners too for working through that. I know that was a bit of a slog going through policy by policy, but as the body in charge of doing that work, we did the work.
Is the body responsible?
Not in charge, responsible, yes. Staff's doing all the work. Okay, so let's move on to item 7A, then members and directors reports.
That's me. Okay, yes, Mr. Executive Director Junior. I don't really have much to report, but basically we could talk about the next meeting that we're anticipating would be on May 22nd. That for this body, that would be here again, and you can expect to see, I believe, the final results of the Enterprise Community Partners Affordable Housing, strategy for regional housing affordability. Following that, it looks like we are probably going to have an RPC meeting on June 12th. So we're taking advantage of all of your meetings the options here. That would be at Sparks Council Chambers, per what I've got here. And then finally, June 26th, back here for another meeting. And there are some items that, regular business that we need to address at those meetings as well. I think that's it.
Okay. And even if we don't have any sort of policies to look at, we'll just have a standing item to get an update on the regional plan update process.
Absolutely.
At
We
those
can
meetings.
let you know where we're at, for sure.
Okay, great. 7B, Legal Counsel's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jessica Prenti for the record. Nothing tonight.
Okay, thanks. Move on to item 8, requests for future agenda items. Okay, hearing none, public comment?
I have none.
Okay. Move on to written correspondence.
We have none.
Okay, great. How about adjournment? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Thanks.